Hello and welcome to Straight Talk with Arun Kumar. Today's topic is, as usual, about politics, focusing on the state of New Jersey. As candidates are trying to get ready to face elections in November of this year, New Jersey is already looking forward to gubernatorial race in 2021. And Jack Ciattarelli is ahead in the race. He is the first Republican to jump into the gubernatorial race. Governor Phil Murphy already has a Republican challenger in Jack Ciattarelli. Hey, Jack, how are you?
Arun, I'm great, buddy. Thank you. And it's great to be with you again.
Yeah, thank you for the time. How's your day?
It's going very, very well. It's a beautiful day out there. It's another day on the campaign trail. So I enjoy very much being out and about with the people of New Jersey.
Campaign trail, but it's not until November 2021. Why so early?
Well, if I learned anything from the last time around when I ran for governor 3 years ago in the Republican primary, is that we need to get an early start. And so that's exactly what I've done by declaring 20 months ahead of time. And because of the pandemic, actually, the early start has been more important than ever because the campaign has been curtailed somewhat. But with things opening up and being able to get out, social distance with our masks and the like, it's been great to get out there with Republicans all up and down the state. And I want to get them energized. This is a very important election next year. At the same time, first things first. We've got Donald Trump on the ticket this year. We've got a great U.S. Senate candidate in Rick Mehta. Of course, we got our 12 congressional candidates on the ticket all throughout New Jersey. And then our local elections, whether it's the Freeholder Board, constitutional officers, and of course, mayor and council positions up and down the state as well. So it's a very important, and I'm up and down the state supporting as many Republicans as I can who are on the ticket this year.
Well, there's always some election every year in the state of New Jersey anyway. So, right?
There is. The good thing about our state constitution, and I've called for a constitutional convention because in many ways, our 1947 Constitution really doesn't address the issues of the day, but they did get one thing right. They made sure that our gubernatorial elections never took place in a presidential year. They always take place the year after. So this way, the people of New Jersey can focus solely on the gubernatorial election, which is obviously critically important to our quality of life and our tax policy here in New Jersey.
Right. So you've been a candidate before, gubernatorial candidate last time, if I'm not wrong. So, right. So what did you learn from that race, and how is that race different from given the COVID situation right now?
Well, 3 years ago, I gave up my legislative seat and I challenged Ken Cagnaglio in the Republican primary, ran a very close second. Certainly was disappointed in the outcome, but not disappointed in our effort. But we learned a great deal from that experience, and we're looking to apply all that we learned this time around. And again, the greatest learning lesson was getting an early start and getting all up and down the state to get Republicans energized. And of course, the pandemic has forced us to really accelerate the social media, email, and internet component of our campaign strategy. I'm very, very pleased, despite the pandemic, despite the shelter-in-place order that was in place for a while, of our ability to stay very visible, I think very vocal and very relevant.
So I hear some of your campaign videos and I watch some of them live, and the people keep saying, Jack can fix it, Jack can fix it, Jack can fix it. What can Jack fix? And why is Jack the man to fix it?
Well, our campaign slogan is "Let's fix New Jersey," and we want people saying Jack can fix it because a great many of us know that New Jersey is broken. Our business climate is the worst in the nation. Our property taxes are the worst in the nation. Our public pension situation is the deficit rather is the worst in the nation. Even before the pandemic, we were last in job growth, wage growth, and fiscal health. And so all these things paralyze New Jersey fiscally and economically. It's becoming more and more difficult to achieve the American dream here in New Jersey. We lead the nation in out-migration. Nearly 2/3 of New Jerseyans want to leave. And while we do a great job of graduating K through 12 students, the majority of those that go to college out of state don't come back. That doesn't portend good things for New Jersey's future in terms of enterprise, entrepreneurship, and job growth. So that's how New Jersey's broken. And what this campaign is all about is fixing New Jersey.
All right, let's elaborate a little bit on that. So let's talk about my favorite topic, property taxes, right? So we are number one in the entire United States in terms of property taxes. What is your specific plan? Everybody dodges this question, or they give random answers, or they give very cliched answers to this question. What specifically is Jack's plan to lower the property taxes?
Well, Arun, I take great pride in never going about answering something with generalities or platitudes and call it a liability. I call it just being honest by giving people what they deserve, specifics. The primary reason why our property taxes are so high in New Jersey is not necessarily the municipal tax portion or the county tax portion, but certainly the school tax portion of our property tax bill. And the reason that is so high is because we have a very, very unfair distribution of 10 billion plus in state aid to our schools. We need a new formula that provides a more flatter and an equitable distribution of that 10 plus billion. We can't have 70% of state aid for schools going to less than 10% of our school districts. It's been that way for 40 years. A great many communities like Jersey City and Hoboken have had significant revitalization. It's time to have a flatter and more equitable distribution of state aid. And I'm thinking about a formula along the lines of something like X for every English speaking student, Y for every English language learner, and the state taking over the cost of special ed with caps in place. And if school boards don't adhere to those caps, their state aid will be reduced. And that is the way to lower property taxes, primarily in New Jersey. We all know there's a great deal of cost inefficiency that comes with having 565 towns and 660 school districts. And I'll advocate for regionalization, but that will be up to local voters and local policymakers to decide for themselves.
Did you start educating? Did you see any change?
I'm sorry, in what?
Did you start educating people on this? Did you see any change?
Well, you bet I will. I mean, I'll go around the state and explain to people, hey, I'll take care of the one portion of the tax bill that I'm responsible for, and that's the distribution of state aid. But you need to take care of the county and municipal tax portion by talking about regionalized approaches and the consolidation of towns. But I'm not going to force that from Trenton. I don't think that imperialistic approach works or is well received. If people want lower municipal and county property taxes, they're going to have to advocate for regionalization at the local level. I'm not going to force that on them. I'll work in partnership with them, and there'll be grants available to make it happen once the decision is made. But that decision has to be made by people at the local level.
In the list of your so-called broken things, you mentioned pension funds, right? So is pension fund system right now broken? Or if yes, how will you fix it?
Well, I believe that it is broken. I don't believe it's sustainable. And any of us that have owned a business, and I'm an MBA CPA and a successful two-time business owner, we all know the only way to reduce your benefits cost for employees is fewer people on the payroll and to change the benefit. I believe that state government is bloated by the tune of 5 to 10%. That's a reduction in staff of anywhere from 3,000 to 6,000 workers. I believe that all new hires need to go in a 401k with a 5-year moratorium on employer contributions. I believe that anybody that's currently in the system but is in the system less than 10 years needs to go into a cash balance plan. I believe that all those with more than 10 years in the system can continue under the old system. But I do believe that retirees whose pension plus their Social Security, and let's not forget that taxpayers paid for 1/2 of the Social Security for state workers. If your public pension plus your Social Security is more than $75,000, you'll begin to pay for your own post-retirement healthcare benefit. And if you take every penny saved from every one of those reforms and put it back into the pension system, we can make it solvent over the long term. So I can solve the pension problem internally. I don't need to go to taxpayers for more funding to sustain what I consider to be an unsustainable pension system.
You also talk about fixing roads and bridges and transit. What's your plan on that?
Well, certainly the infrastructure is the lifeblood of our economy, and it's got to be dependable. So we want to make sure that gas tax revenues are being spent appropriately. We want to make sure there's no waste. We want to make sure that the way we spend those dollars produces the maximum return on investment throughout New Jersey so that our infrastructure is state of the art. This is a sprawl state. There's no denying that. There's no getting around that, which means public transportation, whether it's busing or trains, have to be dependable, and our roads have to be dependable. So people have my word as governor that our infrastructure and our transportation system will work.
I keep hearing about the Gateway Tunnel project. So for almost a decade now, I keep hearing that. So when will we ever get our tunnel?
It's a great question. There are different components of the entire Gateway project, but the primary component is the third rail tunnel under the Hudson River, which is desperately needed. Really, the conditions for the two existing rail tunnels are unsafe, and constantly there are breakdowns and the like. So we can't have people, what should be a 45-minute commute, sometimes turn into a 2-hour commute. This has a terribly adverse effect on the quality of people's lives. And so we need the third rail tunnel underneath the Hudson. And our governor, in close partnership with our 14 congressional candidates, 14 congressional elected officials, rather, 2 U.S. senators and 12 members of the House, our Congress people, need to be on the same page and advocate fervently. I believe this is the perfect federally funded infrastructure program. When you think about what New Jersey means to the regional economy and what the regional economy means to the national economy, and the fact that both New York and New Jersey are donor states, we send more money to Washington than we get back. I think there's a very compelling justification for this being a federally funded infrastructure jobs program that would serve the nation extremely well.
I think so. Superstorm Sandy, made the tunnel even more fragile, right?
Especially it did. It actually revealed how old the tunnels are and how dire their condition and how undependable they are. So Sandy only made a bad situation worse and made it all the more urgent for us to secure the federal funding to get that third rail tunnel under the Hudson.
What do you think is stopping us from moving forward with that? I think it's an 11 point something billion project, right? So what do you think is stopping us from moving forward?
Well, I do think the right formula is for there to be cost sharing. If the federal government's not going to fund it entirely, certainly there are going to be cost sharing between New York, New Jersey, and the federal government. Whether the federal government funds 50% and New York and New Jersey split the other 50%, New York needs to have a skin in the game. That was the reason why the project was canceled way back when, about 11 or 12 years ago. New York didn't have a skin in the game, and they ought to. They benefit greatly from the 400,000 New Jerseyans that go into New York every day to work. They benefit in every way, economically, socially, and a whole lot of other ways. So New York needs to have a skin in the game. I just think we need the right leadership at the right time, the right type of advocacy, and it will happen. And I'm going to make sure that it does under my governorship.
Do you think we need to reform civil service?
I do believe there's opportunities and a need for reforming civil service. It should not be incredibly hard to get rid of a worker that is not producing or has been insubordinate or is just not meeting the acceptable requirements, expectations of the job. When you think of all the laws that are on the books today with regard to wrongful dismissal and discrimination laws and the like, I don't see the need for civil service. But if it is going to remain, it should be under certain reforms.
Well, as you know, legalization of marijuana, recreational marijuana, would also be in the ballot in November. So what's your take on that?
So it's going to be on the ballot. And, it's interesting how many times it's Republicans that are accused by Democrats of I&R, initiative and referendum, and wanting to put things on the ballot to let the people decide. But here's another case of where Democrats have put a very big issue on the ballot. I don't believe this belongs on the ballot. I think there's a lot of aspects to it that may not be perfectly understood by the public. And so I am certainly for the decriminalization of marijuana, but not for the outright legalization. I don't see this as good for New Jersey. I'm not enticed by the tax revenue that would come with it. Quite frankly, the amount of tax that I'm hearing that'll be applied to an ounce of legalized marijuana is exorbitant. And in my mind, we'll continue to have an underground market because it's going to make the marijuana so expensive. But the business community is not for this. I don't think NJEA, the teachers union, should be for this. And so I think people need to speak up that this is going to be on the ballot this November. And it's really in best interest of New Jersey if it was voted down, in my opinion.
Right. So I know you made an issue out of the $10 billion borrowing plan. So where are we with that? I think you also filed a lawsuit, right?
We did file a lawsuit. The Supreme Court, unfortunately, did not agree. And despite what the Supreme Court says, I see them with their decision as having overruled the 2004 landmark decision known as Lance versus McGreevey, where Republican Senator Leonard Lance sued Governor Jim McGreevey because he tried to borrow to balance the state budget. The Supreme Court said that was not legal. It was unconstitutional. And unfortunately, this Supreme Court threw a bone to the Murphy administration because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But as I also said all along, it was irresponsible for the governor to request the funding and for the Supreme Court to approve the funding prior to the governor having presented his budget. Nobody can go to a bank and ask for a loan and not tell the bankers what the money's going to be used for. That's exactly what this administration and the Supreme Court did. And lo and behold, yesterday, the governor presented his budget. And sure enough, This is a $40 billion budget with $4 billion of borrowing, for which the debt service, interest and principal over 35 years, is going to cost way more than the $4 billion itself. And the governor has continued to fund what I think is an irresponsible and unnecessary agenda. So we have $80 million in there for baby bonds. We're now going to put $1,000 in a bank account for every baby born in 2021, for every baby whose family has an income below a certain level. And we're going to make a $5 billion pension payment. And we're also going to sock away $2.2 billion in surplus. Why not cut the pension payment in half, use another billion of surplus? And guess what? You don't need to borrow any money at all. And some might say that it's irresponsible to defer a pension payment. I would suggest that it's much more irresponsible to borrow to make a pension payment. And the baby bond scheme is just unbelievable to me. It's appalling and disgusting that we're going forward with this kind of program when we're having to borrow to keep the lights on in Trenton.
What's your plan on Medicare or
Well,
Medicaid?
Medicare is a federal issue. I don't believe in Medicare for all. I do believe the healthcare system needs to be tweaked, but Medicare is not a perfect system. And I think our congressional leaders should focus on different ways to make Medicare more cost efficient. Here in New Jersey, what we work in partnership with the federal government on, as do the other 49 states, is the Medicaid system. And I believe that we need a whole new approach to Medicaid, which provides health care to the working poor and the uninsured and all those that experience barriers to health care. I would like to see it the way it was prior to the establishment of Medicaid, which was there were clinics that were established by hospitals that provided free care to those who qualified. And it was high quality care, as opposed to this bureaucracy we now have that costs billions of dollars every year to manage under the current Medicaid system.
You are a Republican, right?
I'm a Republican. I'm a proud Republican.
Correct.
One of 1.3 million of whom live right here in New Jersey.
Right. That's a problem in New Jersey. So that's my question. So New Jersey is majorly a Democrat-leaning state. So how do you think you can make your way through it?
Well, listen, there are 1.3 million Republicans. There are 2.3 million Democrats, but the majority party in New Jersey are the unaffiliated independent voters, 2.4 million strong. They lean right, and they, in the end, dictate the outcomes of gubernatorial elections. And
But there's more registered Democrats than Republicans. There's more registered Democrats.
More registered Democrats than Republicans, but more registered unaffiliated independent voters than Democrats. Right. There's 2.4 million of them. And I will tell you, the great many Democrats that live, particularly in the suburbs, are what we consider soft Democrats that are not keen to Governor Murphy's proposals. They're not excited about voting rights for parolees. They're not excited about driver's licenses for illegal immigrants. They're not excited about sanctuary cities and sanctuary states. I don't know how keen they are on the new public school education curriculum. And so I see a real opportunity. And let's not forget, Arun, over the past 40 plus years, no Democratic incumbent governor has been reelected. Jim Florio, Jim McGreevey, and John Corzine were all one term. And I think a lot of times it has to do, as is the case with Phil Murphy, that their policies are inconsistent with what New Jersey's priorities are. The people of New Jersey want to hear our governor talk about property taxes, our worst in the nation business climate, and how to solve our public pension problem so it doesn't cause a crowding out effect in our state budget. So I see a real opportunity here. I actually see New Jersey, when it comes to gubernatorial elections, as a purple state that tints red.
Yeah. So is Jack a conservative, a Republican, or a President Trump supporter, or Trumper, as some people call it? None of the above.
All three. I'm all three. I'm a Republican. I am conservative. In fact, when I was in the legislature, I was awarded by Americans for Prosperity with the Taxpayer Hero Award. Americans for Prosperity is one of the most conservative groups there is. And I was given that award at least once or twice. And of course, I support the president, who's been very successful on the economy, playing hardball with China, border security, the war on ISIS, and certainly with his Supreme Court nominees and appointments. What I would ask the president to consider, as someone who wants to be the governor for 9 million people here in New Jersey, is we'd like him to reconsider his position on the SALT deduction. State and local taxes was something we used to be able to deduct on our federal tax return. We are a donor state that sends way more in income taxes to Washington than we get back. So we would like the SALT deduction back. We'd like to have the federal government seriously consider partnering with us in New York on the rail tunnel, the Gateway project that you talked about earlier. And I will tell you, down along the Jersey Shore, where I've been my entire life, people of every creed, color, or political stripe, no one is keenly in favor of offshore drilling. There's an abundance of natural gas that we've discovered here on the mainland through an unprecedented era of gas exploration, discovery, and extraction. It can carry us to 2050 at least until some of these alternative energy sources are more dependable and cost effective. But nobody along the Jersey Shore, including a great many Republicans who are fishermen, the fishing industry does not want windmills or pipe offshore drilling in the fishing lanes.
Since when have you started supporting President Trump? You did not vote for him in 2016, did you?
Well, what I said in 2015 when the president, when Chris Christie was still in the race, that I did not support the president, but the president, Arun, has been very, very successful, as I said, on the economy and playing hardball with China. In fact, the New York Times recently reported that American intelligence agencies have uncovered a plot by the Chinese government to try to tilt the government in Joe Biden's favor. What does that tell you? It tells you that Donald Trump is doing his job. So I support the president. He's been successful on a number of fronts, and he has my support and my vote this November.
If President Trump gets elected again, do you think his election would have a bearing on your election next year? Can you ride on the coattail?
Yeah, so again, this is one of the things that New Jersey did in its 1947 state constitution. Our gubernatorial elections do not take place in presidential years. And what you want to do as a gubernatorial candidate is not let anything else define you or the narrative. It's up to the candidate to define the narrative. So I'm going to go out there and campaign for governor as though I was running for mayor in your local town and tell you how it is I'm going to improve your quality of life, specifically with regard to our business climate, which is the worst in the nation, property taxes, which are the worst in the nation, and our public pension crisis, which is the second worst in the nation. Those three crises have my really acute focus. And I give my word to the people of New Jersey that we will address those three things. And by the time my first term is done, we will no longer have the worst business climate in the nation. We'll no longer have the worst property tax in the nation. And I promise you that we will solve the public pension crisis.
How will you bring more tax dollars to the state of New Jersey?
Well, the way to do that is two different ways. Number one is advocating for New Jersey projects because of the importance of our economy to the regional economy and the regional economy's importance to the national economy. So we talked before about the Gateway project as an example. The other thing that we want to talk to the federal government about, particularly in South Jersey, is how to increase what we call the federal imprint here in New Jersey, whether it's our military bases, cybersecurity research. The Federal Aviation Technology Center in Atlantic County is a sleeping giant. We want to partner with the federal government and increase the imprint they have, footprint, if you will, here in New Jersey. And those are a couple different ways to bring the dollars home. And again, all of that starts with the governor working in very close partnership. And I'll be meeting quarterly, if not monthly, with our entire congressional delegation, our 2 U.S. senators and our 12 House representatives.
Cool. So finally, we have John Bramnick in the race, potential candidates. We have Chairman Doug Steinhardt, probably a potential candidate. So what makes Jack better than these folks?
Well, there's only one candidate that I focus on, Arun, and that's Phil Murphy. It's my job to convince the people of New Jersey, and particularly Republicans here at the outset, there's only one guy that can win in November, and that's Jack Ciattarelli. I'm not a lawyer. John Bramnick and Doug Steinhardt are lawyers. I think we've had our share of lawyers. I'm not a Goldman Sachs banker. I'm not a Wall Street banker. I'm a Main Street business owner. I think we've had our share between Corzine and Murphy of Wall Street. Let's get Main Street in the governor's seat. So
well,
I'm an MBA CPA that's owned 2 very successful businesses here in New Jersey. I've employed people here in New Jersey. And the other thing I always call the people's attention is I'm the only candidate served 2 terms at the local level. I've served 2 terms at the county level as a freeholder. I've served 3 2-year terms in the state legislature. I term limited myself every single time. I never took the health benefits. And that's a very, very unique resume for someone who's running for governor. No one who's ever run for governor has had that resume, which I think is very unique and can go a long way towards serving the people of New Jersey well. Their priorities are my priorities.
All right. But in order to get to Murphy, you got to get past these guys anyway, right?
Well, listen, I'm the only declared candidate, and my focus is on Phil Murphy. By focusing on Phil Murphy, what I'll prove to Republicans from the outset is there's only one guy in the field who can beat Phil Murphy in November, and that's Jack Ciattarelli.
I have a little fun trivia for you. All right. What's the salary of governor of New Jersey?
$175,000.
Pardon. Who is the first governor of the state of New Jersey?
You know, and I don't.
William Livingston. All right, Jack. That was
Who was the last Democratic governor to be reelected?
I don't know.
Brendan Byrne, 1977. Since that time, no Democratic incumbent governor has been reelected. They've all been one-termers. It's my job to make sure Phil Murphy is one and done in 21.
1977. That's good news for you.
It is.
All right, Jack. Any final message for our viewers?
No, Arun, I truly appreciate the opportunity to be with you. I look forward to next time. And it's always great to be with you and answer the questions that you have in mind.
Thank you very much. And on behalf of our TV channels, Manatv International, TV5, wish you all the very best in your election.
Very good. Thank you, Arun.
Thank you. God bless America. Thank you.